Forget gurus. Forget anyone claiming to be an online business expert without going through the challenges of entrepreneurship themselves. The Real Money, Real Business podcast is here to prove the best insights in online business comes from your fellow online business builders. We dig into stories of entrepreneurs selling their business on the Empire Flippers marketplace so that you can learn how they made their business profitable, how they overcame obstacles, and what lessons they learned in their online journey. If you want to take your business and your knowledge to the next level, you've come to the right podcast. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Real Money, Real Business podcast. We record these interviews so potential buyers have more information about the seller and the businesses to help them make a buying decision further down the road. Today we'll be talking about a dropshipping business for sale, and I've got the seller with me today. So welcome to the show, Adam, and how are you doing?
I'm doing very well this morning, thanks. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no, the pleasure's all ours, and really looking forward to talking about your business in particular. You've built an absolutely massive dropshipping business. Just before we dive into that though, let me give our listeners a very brief summary of your business. So today's listing is a dropshipping business that was created in July 2017 in the home niche. The average monthly revenue for the business is $278,648, and it makes an average of $103,949 per month in net profit. The assets included in the sale are the domain and all of the site's contents and files, an email list with over 4,000 subscribers hosted on Klaviyo, social media accounts, SOPs, supplier contracts and relationships, and employee contracts. You can head over to empireflippers.com/marketplace and search for listing 51900 to learn more about the business. And if you want to start your due diligence, you can unlock the listing first if you'd like to purchase this asset. So that's a very general overview about the business, Adam, but let's find out a bit more about yourself. Can you share with me what your background is in building or running online businesses?
Sure. So I actually got started in the summer of 2016. I was working at a job, actually same company that my wife was at the time, and we saw some large layoffs and a merger in the wings that was going to be coming. And so I was a little overdue in my life, but I wanted to start my entrepreneurial journey and go down that road. So I took a course on how to sell private label products on Amazon FBA. And that was my first e-commerce business. Was not very successful. We can talk about that on another interview. It's its whole other topic. But the point is, it led me to also look at another course, and a number of listeners I'm sure are familiar with this. It's called Dropship Lifestyle. Really great course. I believe in 2018, Shopify called it the best e-commerce course that was available in the marketplace. And I would completely agree with that. It's a top to bottom overview of how to build a high ticket dropshipping store and start launching it with Google Shopping ads. And I will say my first dropshipping store was in an unrelated niche and was not very successful. The margins were too low. Google ads were too expensive, but part of that was my inexperience at the time. I was still learning how to get Google ads really dialed in. And so we launched a second store about 90 days later. And so a side note to that, one of my old friends here in town, he's an entrepreneur in an unrelated actual home services business here in town. And when I told him I was getting into e-commerce, he said, keep me posted and really love to join forces with you on that. And so he's been a really great sounding board on a lot of things over the years in terms of just keeping me going through the first couple of years of any entrepreneurial journey are definitely the toughest. And it's been really nice getting through that to the other side to see this actually grow up to where it's gotten so far.
Yeah, cheers, Adam. Appreciate you sharing your journey there. It definitely sounds like you've graduated the school of hard knocks with flying colours. Obviously you had a couple of failures along the way, but you've obviously managed to learn from those lessons very well to create this business that we're talking about today. Can you share with our listeners, how did you come up with the idea to start the business in these particular niches? I mentioned home, but it's actually home and outdoor. Can you share a bit about that?
Right. So one thing that we always did when we selected our first niche for our first store, we picked a model where I had a coach who was walking me through this and keeping me grounded in what to do every week initially. And he connected me with someone who does research that I can now do on my own. He was just going into Ahrefs and Google Keyword Planner and doing that work for me. And so he'd take all the niches that we had, we'd give him about 12 after we picked 12 off of a list of, about 200. And quite honestly, on this niche, we got down to 2 that all the data, all the analytics, everything seemed to match up so equivalently that frankly, we ended up flipping a coin. So we were down to 2. We picked this one because the coin came up heads.
Right, got you. Okay, so it sounds like a combination of research and trial and error, really, until you eventually found one with profitable products.
Yeah, and so in the home space, the nice thing is you have very patient customers. So when you do things like choke the global supply chain the way that, Peloton and home builders and everybody have done in the last year, if you have any sorts of delays, you run into fewer issues with home products at the moment if you've got, longer lead times on things. But the very first niche we picked was in something that was child related. And I will say, if ever going to go into a niche that's anything for kids, make sure you can deliver very quickly, because if you run into any delays, you're going to have upset parents who have impatient children who are waiting for the thing they promised them. And so I learned that one the hard way as well. That was an interesting experience.
Yeah, no, it's really great advice. I would completely agree with that as well. Being a parent myself, I'm probably one of those target market there. One of those parents who's probably typing away on the other side of the keyboard like, where's my stuff? If it doesn't come quickly. So I hear you.
They pick up the phone and call too.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's like with very minimal delay. We hold retailers to their word for sure. But I was going to ask you, because you've obviously built this business to an absolutely huge size. It's generating a massive amount of monthly revenue and profit. But our listeners will be wondering why you're selling the business right now instead of keeping it or growing it.
What I always liked was Warren Buffett's philosophy that the best time to sell a business is when everybody in your circle would ask you why on earth you're selling the business, because it's doing so well and it's generating good cash flow. Sales growth has been solid. Margins are healthy. All these things that factor into it. That to me seemed like the best time to sell. And quite frankly, I had enough experience getting from step 0 to step 1, just proving the cash flowing model of any of the businesses I've worked on over the last 5 years, that getting from step 0 to step 1 no longer interests me the way that it used to. But getting from step 1 to whatever step you would call this one really did excite me and did have all my energy. And I feel that this is a business that has a lot further to grow. But I want to go back to the space that I had all that initial energy and excitement in, where I could go ahead and grow it up to this level again. I feel that at this point, it's more well-heeled with a more seasoned operator who really has the experience under their belt to organically grow something from 3 million a year, call it, to 10 million a year. That room is in the organic space, not in the paid traffic space. And we've grown our organic traffic over the last year. But when I started looking at what's available in future growth through Ahrefs, I really saw that in the organic space, the sky's the limit here, and I'd love to see somebody take it and run with that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely really good advice as well that you're sharing about that selling the business when it's at its peak, when it's doing its best performance under your ownership, and in the right hands, it could grow even further because it's on a good growth trajectory for sure. I just want to ask you about your experience then as you were building this business. Is there anything that you learned that you would apply to future sites or other dropshipping businesses?
I would say one thing that I learned is how to run paid traffic affordably. Running paid traffic and running paid traffic on a budget that'll let you continue to scale it are 2 completely different things. If you want to give Google money, they're going to take it all day long. And Facebook's the same way. But, if you want to dial it into the point where you can acquire customers profitably so you can do more of that, that was one skill that I would apply to just about any business I would ever run. But also back to that organic space, even though I think that somebody else might be, more well experienced to grow the organic side of this business going forward, I've really been diving deep into learning how to up my skill sets on being able to organically grow any future online business that I would work on in the future. It was made a really strong point to me about 6 months ago. I was talking to one of my paid traffic mentors, a guy down in Australia who's brilliant in that space. And side note, I was actually about to go in I actually found out last summer that I had thyroid cancer. And so I was going in for surgery. And so I reached out to him and said, look, if anything goes wrong, I want to introduce you to my business partner and have you run the paid traffic and make sure that everything in the business is well taken care of just in case something goes wrong. And he said, look, I've looked over your paid traffic campaigns a couple of times. You've really done a great job dialing in the paid traffic. But if you want to go from 3 million to 10 million, the next space to focus on is organic growth. And so I would definitely focus on that in any business because you have a lot more room to grow in the organic space than you do in the paid traffic space. Any niche, you're eventually going to grab all you can on the cost per click stuff.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Adam. And glad to hear that you've come out for the better after the news about the cancer. It's a really interesting point you raised as well about how potentially paid traffic has an unseen ceiling, that there's only so much of the market share you can sort of grab with that, and SEO seems to be the way to go. So that's definitely interesting that you mentioned that. I want to ask you, I guess, on the other side of things, was there anything that you tried that didn't give you the ROI you were hoping for?
One thing that I really looked into heavily for a while, longer than I should have, was Facebook Messenger platform as a way to sell, as a way to market. And even for about 9 months, I ran an experiment where I had it as our store's live chat platform. And I would go back and undo all of that after the experience I had. It is the worst converting live chat widget you can put on a site. In our niche, at least, it didn't convert well because people don't want to chat if they have to sign into Messenger, by and large. I immediately noticed a difference once we got out of that. But also, I put a lot of time and effort into the ManyChat platform. And I really like ManyChat as a platform. I just noticed in this niche, it was not something that was getting the kind of response I wanted to see. And I put a lot of time and effort into that for about 9-10 months there, trying to find a way to dial it in, and eventually just set it aside and worked on other parts of the business.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Another thing as well I wanted to ask you was, as you were learning and I guess more about the entrepreneurial journey as well as dropshipping, you've mentioned about dropship lifestyle, but were there any other resources that you were able to lean on that really helped you get up to speed?
And I wouldn't say that this brought me up to speed other than it kept me going. My business partner is a seasoned entrepreneur. He's been, in business for himself for about 13, 14 years now. And having him as a business partner unequivocally is why I'm still here having this conversation right now, because anytime you hit a wall, if you're going through this journey for the first time, even if you have an online community, if you have somebody that you can really just vent to and springboard ideas off of and figure out how you can keep moving forward rather than what you can do to just give up and go do something else, is an absolute game changer. And I've actually heard a number of interviews that really back this up, that reinforced it in my mind, was that dual founder companies, any kind of startup that has at least more than one person, 2 or 3 founders, will really have a lot more success statistically than single founder CEOs where they just go at it themselves, are determined to just have it all for themselves. It really is the one thing that kept me moving forward at every step when things got really tough.
For sure. I think there can be sometimes some misconception in the business world that it can be a bit of a wild west out there when you enter into a business relationship, when you have a partner or co-founders. I've heard many people as well also say that, it's also only a matter of time before those partners stab you in the back. So there's definitely mixed messages, but for sure, I'm glad that this one is definitely sounds like it's foundation for why it's kept you going on.
I would say choosing a business partner is as important as choosing a spouse. You want to make sure you try to get it right the first time.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, for sure. Just want to move over to the marketing side of things. You mentioning about paid traffic before. Is that where the majority of the traffic for this business comes from?
So I saw it looks like about 37% of our traffic currently is coming from paid traffic. We've really tried to grow over the last 18 to 24 months in the social channels. We have a lot of active social management on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, all the channels that we can get out there on where our audience is hanging out. But also on the organic side, we've been investing a lot more in the last 2 years on content building. And we're actually we just prepaid 3 months of a link building service that we're working with. And I know you guys have had them on your podcast, but we've got authority builders working on bringing a lot of high quality white hat backlinks onto our site to really take that organic traffic where it needs to go from here, because the majority of it is still paid traffic, whether it's suppliers or traffic channels or any of that stuff. I always like to see where the business is standing on one leg and then prop it up from other legs so that it's in a stronger position. And so that's why we're really focused on the organic side now.
Yeah, makes sense. Let me ask you about your day-to-day workload then. Like, what are your typical tasks that you need to do to maintain the business?
There's not a lot to do in terms of day-to-day, just a little bit of communication with the team. We have a couple of full-time VAs who are, in there 40 plus hours a week, working hard and taking great care of our customers and working with our suppliers and really handling, everything when it comes to content publishing and, sales and customer service and email communication, live chat, phone calls. They really do handle all the day-to-day. So there's really very little that I do in terms of active management, but just continuing to stay in touch with that team is really one of the largest jobs that I have at this point. And it's not very time intensive. We communicate via Slack and chat every day, but it's not terribly time intensive because the paid traffic is pretty well dialed in. I like to go in and, just have a look at that every month and make sure that, if any small adjustments need to be made, that we handle that. But most of it is pretty well handled. We've got a great copywriter on staff who she's not full time, but she's a contract team member who oversees the social publishing, does some monthly email campaigns that one of the VAs publish in Klaviyo, and also does some blog editing. We have a content team that's sending in weekly blogs, and she does some editing on some of those just to sort of personalize them a bit more, since she's a little more intimately knowledgeable about our team.
Cool. It definitely sounds like it's a much more hands-off operation. Can you briefly describe what the logistics like of getting the stock from manufacturer, I guess, to someone's front doorstep?
Right. So everything is shipped factory direct. When the orders come in, the order's placed in line at the production queue at whichever factory it's at, unless, some of these products are ready-made, but a lot of are custom fabricated for the customer. And so as those things are made, they're shipped out the door directly to the customer's house. And it's all very hands-off in that regard, in that we've never, in the last 4 years, we've never once had to stock products or deal with any sort of, inventory issues on our end, or any sort of upfront cost of goods issues where we'd need to pay for orders before they actually get solidified on the front end.
Cool. Makes sense. If you did stay with the business, Adam, what would be some of the ways you might try to grow it?
Sure. So I know I'm going to feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but I'm going to go back to talking about organic growth, just because I feel like, I took a look inside of Ahrefs for myself for the first time back in December, January, and I was just blown away because I had watched in analytics how our organic traffic had grown over the last couple of years, and I was patting myself on the back, not having any sense of relativity about how much more we could grow our organic traffic. And so that is really where I would focus all of my time and effort. It's why we brought Authority Builders on, because I've looked at the space of link building. Quite frankly, I have no interest in spending a lot of my time doing link building, and they're great at it. So I brought in somebody who's going to handle that for us so that we can, take the content we have and the content we're continuing to produce and start to get more eyeballs on that by having high quality sites start referring this stuff back with their backlinks on their sites, so that we can really start to, it's one of those things I didn't realize, is that if you have no backlinks, you can have phenomenal content, but you're only going to get so much organic traffic. But if you start getting a few backlinks here and there, suddenly it's like when you put something out on Facebook and somebody shares it, suddenly it's on a lot more eyeballs. And that's exactly what backlinks are. And I never really saw it in that regard until somebody made that comparison for me a few months ago. If you just start to get backlinks, you're going to have a lot more sites pointing to you. And so not only does Google notice that and start ranking you better, but those sites, if they're high quality, are also very directly pointing to you. And so people reading those articles, looking at those references, are clicking and ending up on your site as a result of that as well. So a lot more organic and direct traffic is where I have been putting the focus, just with a more targeted plan than we've ever had in the past years. So that's where I would put a lot of my time and attention going forward. One other thing is, I would continue to look in terms of supplier growth, because it is a niche that's continuing to expand in the U.S. market. And so one thing that we've noticed in the last few months is not so much from China, that's been a regular outreach over the last 3-4 years, but from other countries that are manufacturing overseas, that are looking to start warehousing in the U.S. and entering this market, or have already entered it but are looking to scale up in this market. There are some interesting new supplier opportunities that seem to have just cropped up in the last 6 months that have really intrigued me.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I think in the hands of the right buyer, might be able to use that in some way, either to pivot or something else. Adam, obviously all businesses have inherent risk with them. What would you say are some of the biggest risks with this business that a buyer should be aware of?
I would say, one of the risks would be that it is dropshipping, and any of our suppliers could decide at any time to stop working with us, and that would cut out our ability to deliver products. I will say that anybody who takes a serious look at this business will see that we had one supplier that was very primary, and in that regard, again, back to my point of multiple legs so that the business stands a little bit stronger, we've diversified our offering and our sales mix so that they're not as primary as they were a year ago, but they are still very important to us. And so we've already had that preliminary conversation with them to make sure that that risk is mitigated. They're happy to work with the new owners. They know that we're going through this process. And so we wanted to make sure we stayed a step ahead of that because, frankly, it was my biggest concern when I came to you, in that I wanted to make sure that this is my baby. I built this up. It didn't exist before I started with it. And I want to make sure that whoever takes it over really has a lot of success with it in the years to come.
Yeah, makes sense for sure. Last few questions from me then, Adam. How much support are you offering buyers?
So I'm happy to work side by side with the buyer in that first month of transition, email support, a few Zoom calls. I will say this, back to my previous point I just made, I really have a special place in my heart for this business. I think I always will. And so I'm probably more flexible on that point than just about anything in this. If somebody needs a little more support, I don't see somebody who's unseasoned in the industry being the buyer for this business, but whoever it is, I want to make sure that they're in good shape. And so I'm a little flexible in regards to what kind of support they need to make sure that they're comfortable. But they're going to have the support from our team. And frankly, at this point, the day-to-day operations are so handled by the team that there are certain aspects of our product offerings and the details of what goes on in the day-to-day that the team knows better than I do in a number of regards of the minutiae of things.
That's great to hear. Are you willing to commit to a non-compete?
Absolutely.
And are you open to negotiating something like an earn-out, like seller financing?
As long as the deal is somewhere in the neighborhood of terms that my partner and I'd be happy with, I could see some part of it getting negotiated like that I'm open to it.
Cool. And I guess last question from me then. If you put yourself in the shoes of a buyer, why would you say that this is a business that's worth buying?
Well, it's been interesting because I'm really glad that I built this 4 years ago prior to the pandemic, because if you look at just the overall numbers in the last year, there have been a lot of businesses out there that have been, pandemic flukes and one-offs in 2020. And I'm really glad that we got a chance to start getting into those six-figure revenue months in 2019 rather than just into 2020 and really prove the business model before that. And then again, we did more in January this year than we did in Q1 last year. It's continuing to grow at a clip that I think any buyer who does, I'll just say this one last time, anybody who really puts a good focus on the organic side is probably going to see a nice return on this a lot faster than just the multiple that we're selling at, because they've got that opportunity for continued growth.
Yeah, that's great. Is there anything you'd like to share that you think I might have missed?
I think you really covered everything well, top to bottom, but I'm really glad you ran through all this with me. It's been great talking to you about it.
Yeah, and likewise, it's been great hearing your story and your background, and really looking forward to seeing your business get picked up in the not too distant future by the right buyer. So all the best, Adam.
Yeah, thanks so much, Vinnie. Appreciate it.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. To learn more and see if this listing has already been sold, head over to empireflippers.com/marketplace and search for listing number 51900. If you're watching this on YouTube, click the link in the description to go straight to the listing. Once you've unlocked the listing, you'll be given everything you need to know about the business. So until next time, enjoy your digital journey.